Oh, sorry about that. That's what I get for trying to record on my iPhone rather than putting the camera on a tripod with a mic and a wind muff. Left the tripod in the car. So anyway, this week I went to Nachusa Grasslands, which is a preserve about 100 miles, 160 kilometers west of Chicago. So a couple hours by car. And it's an area that's reminiscent of the way Illinois probably was before, over 200 years ago. The reason it remained the way it is was it was never used for crops. It is what's known as karst terrain. And in a nutshell, that means that the soil the bedrock's very close to the surface. The soil's rocky. The Nachusa Grasslands website has a really good section, science section with information on the geology. So if you're interested in that, I have the link to their website down in the description. Also, the preserve is owned by the Nature Conservancy, and the Nature Conservancy preserves land by buying it. In fact, what happened was people started to realize that this was a unique area, and so there was a move to purchase land, and the Nature Conservancy purchased some of it. The state actually owns some of it as well. So it's really an interesting place, different from what you see in a lot of areas as far as doing photography, because it's a vast, wide open space. I should have checked the website before I went out there. There are bison there now. They introduced bison in several years ago. And of course, bison are native to the area, but hadn't been there in quite some time. So prior to that, you could hike throughout the entire main unit of this of the preserve. But now, of course, with bison, they have a lot of it fenced off. So there is a hiking area near the visitor center, which is essentially an open shelter. It's an open air visitor center with a roof on top, which is great for a day like that was, because when it rained, I could go under the roof. But what they've done since then, since you can't hike across the main preserve, is they have areas on the periphery out away from the visitor center that are open to hiking. And some of these look pretty extensive. I checked on a map. So I need to make a return trip. Anyway, let's go back to the video. I'm going to comment on what you see and what I look for as far as doing photography in a place like that. And then we'll come back after the video for some final thoughts. Here is the bison warning sign, and if you look across the prairie to those hills, as I mentioned, you used to be able to walk over there. And what's interesting is there are rock outcroppings on those hills, and it seems to be a rather dry microenvironment there, because there's actually prickly pear cactus that grow on those rock ledges that are in those hills. But of course, now you don't want to walk in there because bison are really dangerous animals. In fact, bison are responsible for more deaths and injuries at Yellowstone National Park than any other animal in that park. So here's a composition showing kind of the vastness of the prairie under a vast stormy sky, and I enjoy thinking about the expanse of Illinois that's now cornfields, looking pretty much like this at one time. When the early explorers got here, they looked at that and thought, wow, you could grow a lot of crops here. And I think we're fortunate that this place, the land, wasn't suitable for that, so that we're able to enjoy this now. But when you see a scene like this, it's always a good idea to be paying attention to details, because sometimes you'll see a scene within a scene. That's exactly what happened here. I noticed a grouping of these pale purple coneflowers, which grow throughout this preserve, and kind of zoomed in on that group for kind of a detail shot. Now, pale purple coneflowers are not the same flower as the purple coneflower you see in gardens, although some gardens in this area do have pale purple coneflower. Out here on this prairie, as you've seen, it's a very windy place, so these things are a little frazzled. Probably a week ago they were at their peak, but at this point they've been beaten up pretty badly by the wind. Well, this is a flower, it's a pretty flower, but it doesn't belong here. I shot this with the Lumix 42.5 f1.7, which I use kind of as a macro lens because it does have a fairly close focus distance of around a foot. But this is a flower called Deptford Pink. It is actually from Europe. It's grown here as a garden flower, but unfortunately has escaped and is somewhat invasive. It's named for Deptford, England, which is close to London, where they evidently have, at the time, centuries ago, there were a lot of these flowers there. But then, you know, some genius decided to introduce eastern gray squirrels to England, so I'm pretty sure they got the wrong end, the raw end of that deal. Now, if the Lumix 42.5 lens doesn't get me close enough, I'll use a screw-in close-up attachment to put on that lens, a B+W +2 close-up lens, and it significantly shortens the focus distance, as you'll see in the next image here. So it gets us pretty close. This composition's not that great. You got that distracting dried grass stalk on the left side. I think cropping to square might work here, but what I did was I cropped it in the video editor just to the video frame. And you can see it's still very sharp even with this close-up attachment, which is only a single element close-up attachment. There are dual element close-up attachments that are actually have fewer aberrations, but this works pretty well. Well, another line of showers moved in, and at this point I had either the 42.5 or 100 to 300 Lumix lens on my G9, and I didn't want to change lenses in the rain, so I reached into my pocket and pulled out my iPhone, and it's an iPhone 12 Pro Max, and it has really terrific image quality, especially out of the main camera. And you know, if you have either this phone or in the Samsung line, the S21 Ultra, and there are plenty of other phones that give really good image quality with their cameras. So don't be afraid to use it if the situation arises where it makes sense to. This shot was taken in Apple's ProRAW format, which is a DNG file, but it has Apple's computational photography like Deep Fusion and the high dynamic range built into it. Adobe Lightroom, which was formerly called Lightroom CC, not to be confused with Classic, has a profile for Apple ProRAW files. So when you open that file in Lightroom, the default is the Adobe color profile. And what you want to do is go to the profiles selection and scroll down a bit to find the Apple ProRAW, because this is what's going to happen if you don't. When Lightroom opens up the file, it just treats it like a DNG, and you get a picture that looks like this. So make sure if you're going to do it this way to use the right profile, or just shoot it in the regular high efficiency format, because the results out of that look pretty good, and it doesn't take up nearly as much space on your phone's memory. This is a male dickcissel. Pretty sure it's named for its song. And we'll see the female in just a bit here, and then I'm going to be quiet and let you listen to the next clip. Dickcissels are actually in the cardinal family. They have kind of a superficial resemblance to the eastern and western meadowlark with a yellow front and a little black bib. The meadowlarks have a more of a pronounced black V, and meadowlarks are in the New World blackbird family, so they're not closely related. At this point, the rain started to abate for the day, but we still had spectacular skies that I was able to capture. When I returned to the visitor center shelter, I had the 100 to 300 Lumix lens on, which I used for the previous sequence of grass. And there were these barn swallows, a pair of barn swallows flying around. And of course, this is a very ubiquitous bird. It's found on every continent except Antarctica. And I soon realized the reason they were flying around twittering was that they had built their nest up underneath the eaves of the visitor center roof. And they thought I was a little too close. So after getting the shot of these babies that look about ready to leave the nest, I moved on and headed for home. So that's Nachusa Grasslands. Luckily, even though there was rain, the weather wasn't severe. We just got out of a tornado warning here. Supposedly there was a storm to our east over the city of Chicago that had the potential to drop a tornado down. It doesn't appear that it did. But it was just rainy. But there's an old saying, and the old saying is bad weather means good pictures. The colors on a day like that are much more intense than they are if it were sunny. So there's that. And if you enjoyed this, liked it, if it was helpful, please like it. Please subscribe. That helps me. And click the little bell if you want to be notified of my next videos. I have a few I'm working on that I think will be interesting to people. So I really appreciate your viewership, and I will see you next time.